The year is 1980 and the world has never been at a worse state than this. Nuclear warfare has ravaged much of it and from its ashes rose the new world order. The remaining superpowers all equally totalitarian and destructive. There is Oceania under IngSoc or English socialism, Eurasia under neo-Bolshevism and finally East Asia with their death worshipping. These three superstates all have one single goal, world domination. And in 1984, when the fragile armistice shall expire, the last battle will occur as the world will once again be consumed by total warfare. However, in between these superstates, disputed territories remain, territories who have through miracles been able to remain free. We are one of these states, the Free Africa. Both IngSoc and Eurasia tried to invade us, even occupying Cairo, our capital. But as they thought our forces were shattered, we reappeared, led by the ghost of Cairo, and butchered them all to the last man, punching out these foreign invaders. However, they will be back, and if we don't prepare, we will be the first to fall. So, the ghost of Cairo assembled the most powerful and influential leaders of our country in order to put together a plan of action. We need to find unity to heal our industry and form a coherent armed forces. We decided to first summon the business leaders, as without an industry there is no armed forces. There were two options: either we seize some of their factories for national security, or we simply sort out the mess with our military acquisitions. Since the first could destroy trust in our freedom, we focused on our bottom line. Then the huge issue of refugees had to be answered. Every single day hundreds of people find themselves fleeing from the totalitarian states, and this has caused us both stability and economic stress. However, they don't only bring with them horror stories, but also the spirit to fight, and many of them would be more than willing to join our armed forces to destroy the states who have oppressed them. So we decided to continue keeping our borders open despite the negatives. As the council continued, the question raised regarding a large-scale reconstruction project. It was between reconstructing factories or fortifications. Since one will provide us with more weapons, we reopened the factories. Next up, we turn to the army, or more precisely the warlords. They are promising to help us and are offering us several thousand soldiers. However, we decided to use their experience instead to train our existing and new troops, because we've already started training more soldiers. Then, while discussing the next issues, the council came to an abrupt halt as no more things were agreed upon. And this quickly spread fear, as if this happens in wartime everything would collapse. So, with the ghost of Cairo never more popular, he requested legally binding emergency powers, so that the drastic reforms can be undertaken without destroying our freedom in the meantime. And the council was more than happy to grant this. We also promised that once the wars are over and we've won, a new constitution will be drafted. And so the council came to an end with one last message: we will fight for freedom and the tyrants will be destroyed. We will be the beacon of hope in this world and restore freedom and human dignity in the states that have gone so far into tyranny that the individual and their free thought is dead. And this message was quickly spread throughout our vast country to galvanize support and form a strong will to resist. The first focus for the Ghost of Cairo was on our industry and improving our construction methods. And a one-year plan was devised, which consists of both constructing civilian factories, some military factories, and a massive railway connecting Cairo to our southern front and Western Africa, in order to circumvent possible naval warfare from our enemies. Another big part of it was to introduce rationing programs in order to ensure that no resources important for our war efforts are wasted. We then started shifting our so far mostly civilian focus towards military expansion, because our army, who has now grown to 500,000 men, is in dire need of guns if we want to continue expanding. So we constantly looked into ways of strengthening and effectivizing our military industries. And a part of that was to simply forego of luxuries and put our population to hard work in the factories, to save our freedom for each gun they produce. After this, we were planning to move from expanding our industry to our army by starting to upgrade our outdated equipment. However, we didn't come far before terrifying news arrived from across the globe. 2 years before the end of the armistice, the East Asian and Oceanian superpowers declared war on free Indochina to take it over before the armistice fell. And this sent shockwaves throughout the free world, with us shortly after deciding to form an alliance to stand against this aggression, because if we don't stand united, we will fall one by one. However, this does mean we are now at war with Oceania and East Asia, with the front in Southern Africa reignited, 2 years before we had planned. Fortunately, we have enough divisions to defend the south, and with absolutely horrible supply for Oceania, at least in some areas. Together with their disregard of human life, we don't expect any big offensives at the moment. There were some attacks in Middle Congo, but they weren't successful, and we were actually the first to advance by capturing a small province north of the Mombasa port. But we quickly had to stop this as we were needed in the north. Rumors had spread that the Eurasian armies will invade Arabia, and if they fall, the door to Cairo will be open. So we sent in 18 divisions that we had in reserve and set them up on a defensive line around Damascus. And soon enough the rumors were true, with the Bolsheviks crossing the border into Syria and Iraq. Many of our Arab allies were lost, but we didn't dare leaving our line to save them, because otherwise we might fall as well. Looking back to southern Africa, there were surprisingly few forces in Tanzania, maybe because the frontier were preparing to invade Indonesia instead. So we used this to restart our attack on Mombasa. With the city being mountainous, we instead went around it, and after our first breakthrough, we could encircle the city and destroy their forces. Terrifying news would then arrive from Arabia once again. The Bolsheviks had staged 2 naval invasions behind our defensive line in Damascus. Fortunately, no port had been captured, and we miraculously had 6 divisions nearby who were able to deal with the southern invasion quite quickly, then destroying the northern one together with the Arabs. 2 more good news arrived shortly after. Firstly, we had been able to continue in southern Africa, capturing almost all of Tanzania, and secondly, we have started producing light tanks who will bring our army to the next level. In addition, the offensive in Tanzania didn't stop, as we could go past it, capturing both Elizabethville and, after harder battles, the first port in Mozambique. But after this we took a quick pause, not to take a rest, but to bring in our first 3 light tank divisions. And the goal is to use them to completely destroy the southern frontier. All of Africa is liberated, even Madagascar, and there are more good news that have flooded our newspapers. That the armistice is broken and the 3 world powers are at war with each other is the first. And this has led to a bold proclamation from our resistance, that we will break the chains of the oppressed and root out the evils who are destroying the human spirit. And we have the victories to back it up, because the other great news are that Indonesia has landed troops on Australia with the goal to destroy the frontier of Oceania. And India have made great progress against East Asia since they were forced to relocate troops to fight the Russian SSR. So both the Persian and Himalayan divisions of East Asia are approaching capitulation. So it is time for us to use the weakness of the 3 superpowers to our advantage, and we will focus on Oceania by committing a majority of our army and our whole quite outdated navy to naval evade the South American region. And with the Oceanian navy probably trying to fight that of our Indonesian allies, we had no issues to gain naval superiority, so we could launch the naval invasion without issues. As our first few forces arrived to the shores, we met resistance. However, we outnumbered them 3-1, allowing us to land on the sides of their defenses, quickly forcing them out of 2 ports and even destroying one of their divisions as we united the 2 landings. And so we had established a secure beachhead, meaning that the conquest of South America and America as a whole has started with a victory. Before most of our troops had crossed the Cape Verde plain, we already started pushing further inland and along the coast. With not many IngSoc divisions around, we easily captured 2 more ports. The plan was to then naval invade Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, but with the Oceanian Navy having regained naval superiority, we couldn't. So instead we took the risk of sending over 5 of our light tank divisions to reach their capital by land. Fortunately they arrived unharmed, allowing us to quickly start the offensive. With the light tanks still superior on the battlefield, we had no problems breaking through and arriving all the way to the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. This was where we met the most resistance, but after letting them stage failed counterattacks, we had drained their organization enough to capture Sao Paulo, encircling their capital at the same time and later entering it. But despite having captured Rio, we were far away from capitulating them. So we stepped up our offensives, now with 10 tanks, and quickly arrived to Montevideo, then entered former Argentina. Our speed picked up even more after this as we arrived to the Pacific Sea with the capturing of Santiago. Peru was next as we turned north, and then we made the final mad rush to Bogota. Surprisingly, we reached the city quite easily, but we had to fight a little more before they would surrender. But eventually they did, allowing us to gain control over all of South America. The same good news arrived from the east, where the East Asians had been almost completely pushed out of China, and the frontier has also fallen. Which means that the southern hemisphere is ours. Our plan is to now continue into Northern America, and we've already started, because while our main forces cleared out the Amazon jungle, our light tanks made their way to Mexico City, even though the terrain was not ideal for our fast warfare. But after getting a huge encirclement where we almost lost 5 divisions in order to get it closed, things went a lot faster. So soon enough, all of former Mexico was dehumanized and we could enter the territories of the old United States of America. With the Pacific Division of Oceania already 71% towards capitulation, we are certain that capturing the big cities in California and Texas will be enough. And soon enough, after easily capturing the cities in California, as we had defeated their whole defenses, they were extremely close to capitulating. Naturally, Texas went the same, even though they encircled 2 of our tanks. But this didn't stop us, and Gran Pacifica capitulated, leaving only Airstrip 1 and the 13 sectors, who are our next target. And as they have already taken 8 million casualties and don't have many divisions left, we aren't expecting huge resistance. Especially since after dealing with the last few divisions resisting in Pacifica, their casualties rise to 9 million. So we ordered our tanks to simply drive to the east coast as fast as possible, since it is there all the important cities are located. There was of course resistance, but it was almost unnoticeable, and some tankers even called it a simple road trip. On the way to the coast, several big cities were captured, and once we arrived, we turned north to capture the cities there. It included Washington, Philadelphia, New York and Boston, but we didn't stop there, we continued into Canada as well, and with the capturing of Ottawa and Montreal, the 13 sectors capitulated, leaving Airstrip 1 all alone. But Oceania isn't the first of the superpowers who have been reduced to a single sector. Because after the fall of Japan, Manchu Korea is the only state left of East Asia. However, while Oceania and East Asia have been greatly reduced in size and almost defeated, the people of Eurasia are still as oppressed. We have in fact not liberated a single state from their authoritarian grip. So it is them we will focus on, and to win we will need to open a second front by naval invading, probably Spain. And for this a secret project of ours will come in handy. We've constructed 10 heavy ships and light cruisers and destroyers to support them, so that we can not only gain naval superiority but also destroy any enemy navies. However, with them currently being untrained and us wanting more support ships, it will take some time before they are ready. So while we waited, we attempted to get the breakthrough on the Arab front, despite the huge number of Eurasian forces. At first we saw no successes, but once our light tanks reached the battlefield, things slowly changed. And soon enough they were able to force the enemy forces to retreat as they couldn't reinforce fast enough. And once we got this initial breakthrough, we could easily utilize it to not only encircle 12 divisions, but also liberate Aleppo and enter our first Eurasian city. Seeing our success, our allies quickly joined in on our effort, and together we liberated almost all Arab lands the Bolsheviks had occupied. And with the enemy forces extremely unorganized due to their horrible supply, we could easily continue into Turkey as well. And soon enough we got a huge breakthrough that allowed us to reach all the way to the Black Sea. This, together with an Indonesian naval invasion in Antalya, allowed us to easily reach Ankara and the eastern side of Istanbul, encircling a bunch of forces in the meantime. So once most of Turkey was ours and their casualties were almost 13 million, we received the news that our invasion of Spain was prepared. Because our 10 heavy ships, who now have 90 support ships, have already scared away all enemy ships from the coast of Spain. And so the naval invasion was of course a large success, as we could immediately pump in our whole army. Once again our tankers and even infantry called it a simple road trip, as Spain was quickly captured without much resistance. As we started arriving in France and captured the cities of Bordeaux and Marseille, we put aside an army of infantry to stage the naval invasion of Italy. Once again it was a clear success, as all the big cities in the west were captured. But the Mediterranean SSR still didn't surrender, and we had to face hard battles in the north in order to at last get them to surrender. But while our offensive had slowed down in Italy, it hadn't in France, as Paris was already liberated. So after the fall of the first SSR, the continental SSR will be our next focus. By consolidating all our tanks in the center of the French front, we were able to break through despite the Bolshevik reinforcements who had started arriving. This breakthrough was huge, as we not only encircled a huge part of their forces by arriving in the Benelux, but also since we successfully crossed the Rhine without resistance. A river that would have been difficult to cross if they had defenses. After destroying the encircled divisions, we didn't take a pause, but continued as fast as possible towards Berlin. We took many casualties of course, but probably not as many as them, because we reached the capital nonetheless, and after continuing further into Central Europe, mainly by capturing Prague, Munich and Bratislava, the continental SSR capitulated. This, together with the fact that they have taken 24 million casualties with about half of our deployed forces left, and as we've entered southern Sweden, the end of Eurasia is close. So all we had to do was to cross the Istanbul Strait and exploit this surprise to capture the big cities in Bulgaria and the city of Bucharest. Then we sent a single division all the way along the coast to Odessa, then Sevastopol, which made the Black Sea SSR surrender, leaving only the Baltic SSR and the Russian. The Baltics are already 80% towards capitulation, and we've successfully set up a quite strong collaboration government in Russia in order to make them capitulate faster, so we don't expect much more resistance. But instead of continuing north towards Finland, we decided to simply naval invade the south of Finland, so we didn't have to walk around the Gulf. With the SSR not at all ready, we didn't meet any resistance at all, and we could even land troops in Estonia as well. So after capturing a few more cities, the Baltic SSR capitulated, leaving the Russians left. With our allies having already started invading them and almost reached Stalingrad, they are already 31% towards capitulation, so reaching Moscow should hopefully be enough. Believing this, we consolidated all our tanks in the center of the front, which was probably overkill since there weren't many enemy divisions guarding the region. But this allowed us to spread out our forces and capture a lot more cities than simply Moscow. However, they didn't capitulate, forcing us to move north from Moscow and south from Finland to enter Leningrad and Novgorod. Then move south from Moscow towards Stalingrad, since our allied forces had been stopped. So with us approaching their last holdout, the Eurasians finally surrender. While we could sit down to discuss the future of these freed territories right now, we will wait to simply occupy them in order to first deal with Airstrip 1, the last holdout of the totalitarian regimes. Since they had had a long time to build fortifications, we are expecting harsh battles on land. So we assembled our biggest invasion force yet, and so we quickly launched it. Still, it was not enough to land everywhere, and probably more than 90% of our battles on the beaches failed. However, the 10% that were successful enough, as we secured a port in Cardiff and all ports on Ireland. So while we prepared to take over the whole of England from Cardiff, we easily defeated Ireland as they quickly ran out of supply. Then, as we returned to England, Indonesia had managed to land in Liverpool, making our attacks far easier. In addition, with the whole tank army as attackers, we quickly encircled encircled half the defenses, spelling the end for Oceania. And it truly did, because the next month London was liberated and we could turn north, driving as far as possible until the last tyrannical state finally surrendered. So we have done it. Earth has been liberated and the chains of all humans across the globe are broken. The last thing before we write the new constitution, the ghost of Cairo has promised, is to create a new state in the world. Of course, Southern Africa will be ours, and then in the rest of the world we divided it into as many pre-tyranny nations as possible, even though they don't make sense anymore as the tyrant destroyed all cultures. But it will at least keep loyalists divided. So, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.